Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. And in Supreme Court news, and they've been all over the news the last couple of weeks, the Supreme Court, if you didn't know, also just supercharged disinformation. Now, it's not being phrased like that, but I think this is what's literally going to happen. And if you've been paying attention to the news, and I'm not adjudicating the politics, I do not care what you believe, but this court term for the Supreme Court has been a wild one. They essentially granted presidential immunity to a sitting president like Biden, or possibly Biden or Trump in the next election, whoever wins, not adjudicating that. Chevron deference was killed off, which is a huge one, and so many more other decisions. Again, whatever you think about those, that's your business, but this is simply the truth. But that's not why we're here today. Today, we're talking about a technology ruling that they just leveled a few days ago or so, and that is going to have huge ramifications for tech legislation. And what we are talking about is the net choice ruling, and let's dive in. You might not have heard of this one because few are actually talking about this, but I actually did find a solid write-up in The Verge regarding this one. Now, the net choice decision is poised to affect an absolute ton of tech legislation that is still making its way through Capitol Hill and in state legislatures, as well as lawsuits that are right now going through the system as well. This includes things like the pending First Amendment challenge to the TikTok ban bill. Remember, Congress wants to essentially ban that. They're suing to say, hey, we have a right to be here too. And the U.S. government says you're just an agent of the Chinese government, which, well, is true. So that's one that's going on there. And on top of it, we have a First Amendment case about a Texas age verification law that the Supreme Court took up only a day after the net choice decision as well. And so let's get into the nuts and bolts of this. And here's what actually happened with this. Now, the net choice decision states that tech platforms can exercise their First Amendment rights through their content moderation decisions and how they choose to display content on their services. Meaning, it is Facebook's First Amendment right, even though Facebook is a corporation, not a person, to essentially say, hey, this is how our content moderation is going to work. This is what we choose to display and not display on our site. That's our right now. Now, that's a very strong statement that has clear ramifications for all of these different types of laws that are attempting to regulate platforms' algorithms in the name of things like online safety for children, and also the pending lawsuit, like I mentioned, that seeks to block TikTok and more. Now, like I said, there's more to this as well, and I'm going to get to that. But net choice isn't a radical upheaval, for the record, of First Amendment law. But until last week, there was no Supreme Court opinion that actually applied to the existing framework to social media platforms. The justices did not rule on the merits of the cases, interestingly enough. They instead ruled that the lower courts had not completed the necessary analysis for the kind of First Amendment challenge that had been brought. In other words, because the courts didn't do that, the First Amendment still applies. And so the decision still provides significant guidance to the lower courts, though, on how to apply First Amendment precedent to social media and content moderation, meaning we may not be done with this, but as of right now, Facebook can do what it wants. Quote, the Fifth Circuit was wrong in concluding that Texas's restrictions on the platform selection, ordering, and labeling of third-party posts do not interfere with this expression. That is according to Justice Kagan. She's one of the liberals on the court, wrote of the appeals court that upheld Texas's law seeking to prevent platforms from discriminating against content on the basis of viewpoint. Now, the decision is a revealing look at how the majority of the justices are viewing the First Amendment rights of social media companies, something that's an issue, obviously, for kids' online safety, the TikTok ban, and everything else. The net choice ruling also calls into question how far legislatures can go in regulating algorithms, meaning software programmed to surface or deprioritize different pieces of information that you or I could see. And so by virtue of that, if they can do whatever they want, they can continue to prioritize what I think is the biggest issue, because this also implies, and this is something for the record that The Verge did not mention in their article, that if these platforms continue to essentially regulate themselves, which is what the court just ruled, then the problem of the absolute insane amount of rampant disinformation, especially from foreign intelligence agencies that we are being slammed with right now because we're going through an election, is never going to get fixed. Disinformation is technically free speech despite its intent. And because it's usually angry in nature, it drives revenue for the Facebooks of the world, and they therefore prioritize it. Frances Haugen, the whistleblower of Facebook, literally showed that they had internal psychological studies at Facebook that said, we are prioritizing anger, we are ramping up rhetoric, we are letting this disinformation go wide and not clamping it down because it's making us money, it's being profitable. And the Supreme Court basically said, knock yourself out. I think that is a huge ruling that, quite frankly, is flying under the radar. And as we're talking about the other important ones, like, the presidential immunity and Chevron deference and all of these, we can't ignore this, because at the end of the day, whether you pay attention to politics or not, odds are you're addicted to social media like everybody else. And this has a direct impact on how social media can continue to spew the absolute worst of society to the rest of us. And I think that's something that is just, quite frankly, being missed in this conversation as we were talking about everything else. And so with that, I'm going to leave you at that. I am not a fan, but here we are, and I don't know what we're going to do other than, I don't know. They're the highest court in the law, so what do you do? And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where we're going to get the same old disinformation, same with YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private and also properly informed. Take care.